Good morning and welcome to the session on digital learning at Penn State University. My name is Sandy Clemmer, and it's my privilege to act as the moderator for this session. And I don't need to tell any of you, change in higher education is happening at an unprecedented pace. And it's causing us to ask questions about things that were the steady things that we knew about, business models, teaching and learning strategies, face-to-face versus online instruction. So this session is a really neat opportunity to kind of call a timeout and say, gosh, university leaders, the folks who are going to be taking us into the future in addition to our own efforts, what should we be thinking about? Here are some questions that we have. So this conversation is really intended to be an informal discussion with our panelists. So before I get started, I'd like to encourage all of you to really be thinking about the questions that you have, the questions that you'd like to get answered, because the focus of these four people to my left is really to make sure that you walk out of here with some information. So who are you going to be asking these questions of? Starting with Dr. Weidemann. Craig Weidemann is the Vice President for Outreach and the Vice Provost for Online Education. He has responsibility for the university's external outreach, engaged scholarship, and online education initiatives. Specifically, he has responsibility for Penn State Online and the World Campus, for public media, and professional and community education. Next on our panel, we have Richard Coons. Rick is the Senior Director of IT for the Commonwealth Campuses. In this capacity, Rick works with campus leaders to help coordinate their IT needs and focus his efforts in things like intercampus course delivery, the use of hybrid and blended learning to enhance the Penn State experience for students enrolled across the campus system, and also building relationships with IT units here at University Park. We then have Rob Pangborn, and Rob is the Vice President and Dean for Undergraduate Education. Rob provides leadership in undergraduate education and provides specific support for curricular development, innovations in teaching and learning, and programs to enhance student retention and graduation. And last but certainly not least, we have the newest member to the Penn State leadership family, and that's Jennifer Sparrow. Jennifer is the Senior Director of Teaching and Learning with Technology and has been with Penn State for a little under a year after a career with Case Western Reserve University. Jennifer has spent over 15 years advocating for the use of technologies to advance active and engaged learning, and has specific interests related to the areas of the convergence of pedagogy, learning spaces, and technology, faculty development opportunities that really focus on great teaching and learning, and the use of data for real-time learning analytics. So as I said, this is really intended to be a conversation. So you're not going to see a PowerPoint. You're not going to hear a bunch of canned answers. And I really do encourage you, be thinking about the questions that you have. We have a couple of microphones floating around. I will ask your patience. Don't ask a question until you have a microphone in your hand, because we are recording this session and would really like to make sure that the folks who view this in the future will be able to hear the questions. So to get us started, we do have a couple of questions that were submitted in advance, and we'll just get the conversation started. So starting from the top, and because I work for Outreach, I'm going to pick on my boss. So Craig, if I were to say to you, in the last years, technology has just created unprecedented amounts of change across higher education. What are the most significant changes that you have seen in digital learning here at Penn State University in that time?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk with you today. The last couple of days, Rob Pangborn and Kevin Rooney and I have been at the Board of Trustees meeting, and a couple of the committee meetings we talked about this session, and the trustees were just amazed that people would give up a Saturday to talk about technology and education and pedagogy, and I think I was extremely proud to be able to share that. And also, I was supposed to say, this is my favorite day of the year at Penn State. It's just such an exciting and dynamic day. There are so many things that are impacting change here, but I want to talk about 5 that I think are really critical, and then I'll turn to my colleagues. But the first and foremost thing I think about change and focus on student learning here at Penn State is Dr. Barron's imperatives. Does anybody know those imperatives? He's serious about them. I mean, he talks about them at the trustee meeting, at Senate meeting, President's Council, Chamber of Commerce, every forum he's talking about these, and resources are following these priorities. There's two that I think are really important for this group. One is student access and affordability. He's looking at how do we reduce time to degree and student debt. Coupled with that is a focus on education and curriculum development, what we care about, student access and affordability and learning, and around technology. It's a priority of his. But how he's looking at it is not as how does the World Campus take care of it, how does the campuses, how do the colleges, do we do face-to-face or online? It's all integrated. If I can give an example, he created a committee called the Penn State Enhanced Education Pathway Committee. It was chaired by David Christensen from the campuses and Renata Engel from the World Campus. He said, look at all of Penn State and figure out a solution, not in silos, but as one university. Dr. Jones has reinforced the same thing. He's constantly talking about it's all coming together, face-to-face, online, blended, hybrid, and we need to think together as one institution. He's challenged the World Campus. He said he's supportive of the growth to 45,000, but he said if the World Campus is not embedded in the university and deeply connected to the core, we failed. Last week he was visiting Mont Alto, which I think Rob was with him, and he came back and he said, there's students there that want access to online courses. We got to figure it out. And again, not the World Campus or the campuses, but how do we do it together? I think a third thing that's impacting us in our success and what's happening in technology and learning are the people in this room. I don't think we can underestimate how integrated the infusion of focus on pedagogy and educational technology is at Penn State compared to other institutions. Last night I was sitting with Amy and she said Notre Dame University is very excited. They just hired their first instructional designer. We have over 250 people here in instructional design alone, and just think about how ubiquitous it is. I mean, there's 600 people today that are here. There's probably another 1,000 who will be very excited about coming. It's a real strength of Penn State, and I think it's going to be really powerful relative to our future. The fourth is the World Campus, and I agree with what Al Turgeon said, who was a faculty member who was one of the first teachers in the World Campus. He said, Penn State is the World Campus is Penn State. It's not that building over there, it's not the people that work over there. It's the faculty who teach in the MBA at 4 different campuses. It's the incredible design units across the university. It's the folks in financial aid that are trying to find ways to get more financial aid for students studying at a distance. It's across the university, and it's our challenges is how do we integrate it and bring it all together. I can tell you that I looked at every strategic plan of the university, and every dean and most of the chancellors are talking about how to grow the World Campus and how to integrate it into their RI instruction. It's who we are. It's a great strength. And then finally, the fifth point that I think is really going to impact us is the focus nationally on educational technology as a business sector. There's been over $1 billion invested in startups in ed tech. Dr. Barron has 2 imperatives that are related to this. One, he's focused on economic development and student career success and student engagement. The student engagement is about entrepreneurship and economic development. He's selected ed tech as a sector that we should pursue. We've got tremendous brilliance in this room across the university to develop apps, websites, hardware, software to help people learn. Next Saturday, there's a hackathon of students. There's 1,200 students that are coming to solve problems around ed tech. There's tremendous strength and enthusiasm. So I think that's probably the thing that's going to really impact our ability to compete. So I think it's Dr. Barron's imperatives. It's Dr. Jones's vision of integration. It's the strength of what we have across this room and across the university. It's the World Campus, and I think the focus on ed tech.
Do you want to add anything to the response?
Sure. Good morning. Good to see everybody. I'm a very poor excuse for Madeline Haynes, obviously, but I did wear a tie to make up for it. So. As Dr. Weidemann said, the education technology becoming an industry is because of the explosion in technology opportunities that we have to deliver, engage, and help our students assimilate the information that they get from our very talented faculty. And in a campus perspective, that has given us the ability to use Penn State's strengths from multiple different areas to bring those talents of our faculty and the talents of our staff and of our fellow students in delivering that education in between our locations around the state. The campuses continue to be a vital part of Penn State, and we enjoy the partnerships with Undergraduate Education and World Campus as we go move forward in that realm to figure out how we're going to bring these technologies to best use, at the same time walking that razor-thin line between protecting the information that Penn State develops and giving faculty and students the best possible experience we can to get a Penn State education.
Okay, so I feel a little bit out of my element because I'm sitting between two people who actually know something about IT and learning. Administrators don't know a lot, but we do try to facilitate things. So I'd like to just kind of take a little bit different tack. Some interesting data came by my email on Thursday, and it relates to the work of the University Committee on Instructional Facilities. And that's the group that works very closely with the Office of the Physical Plant and ITS to create classrooms that will allow you to use the technology that you'd like to use. And just a little bit of history there. Back in 1992, we had 282 general purpose classrooms, and they were serviced by 3 mobile carts with technology. And you may remember, those of you who were here back then may remember that most of the technology that actually was permanent in the classrooms was overhead projectors, as Dr. Mazur showed earlier today. In 2004, we had 311 general purpose classrooms, and about 2/3, 194 of those were technology equipped. And in 2014, just last year, we had 356 general purpose classrooms, and all had some level of technology, and many of them had kind of a full complement of technology. But the point I'd like to make here is that during that same roughly 20 years, we had an increase here at University Park of 8,000 students. But the number of actual seats in the classrooms increased by about 450. And if you think about those 8,000 students, they're probably taking up something like 5 times that many seats because they're all taking multiple classes, right? So we've got something like 40,000 seats needed to accommodate those students and only 450 new seats. So that's something like a 100-fold shortfall. So that represents a real challenge, but also an opportunity in using technology. And so I'll come back to just 2 of the changes that I think I've seen a lot of at Penn State. And one is obviously the access to information that technology provides. Certainly the ability to access evidence and data, simulations and so on makes it possible for us to decouple or unbundle the role of faculty as content providers and allow students to get that access themselves and therefore do more authentic problem solving and design work and engineering and so on in the classroom instead of simply a kind of a lecture mode. So that also points out one of the dangers when we equip a classroom with technology. We don't want it to end up being just a fancy way of lecturing. So that's, I think, one of the key changes. The other change that I've noticed is the ability to really bring learning to the learner. And so certainly through the World Campus and fully online learning, that's an example of that. But I think we're seeing much more of that happening in a hybrid mode in the classroom. I've been really encouraged by some of the experiments faculty have undertaken to connect our students, working with teams all around the world in various kinds of classroom settings. And I think there are a lot of ways that we can actually use the online technology fully integrated with what's happening in the classroom. So.
Great.
I haven't been here long enough to talk about change yet. So.
Perfect. This question's coming to you, Jennifer. As Rob referenced, with great opportunity can also come pretty significant challenge. So let's shift gears for a second. While we tee up the first questions, we do have some microphones that are floating around the room. Jennifer, if you'd kick us off. As you think about the challenges that Penn State has to address in the near future, what do you think are the most significant challenges? Said another way, what keeps you up at night?
Sure. Speaking in front of 500 people keeps me up at night. So my answers may not be as sharp as if you had caught me earlier this week. I think there are some challenges, but certainly even listening this morning to these three gentlemen sitting next to me, there are a huge number of resources and a great number of people, really smart people, thinking about these challenges here at Penn State. So as Craig mentioned, the UCIF committee, which talks about the learning spaces at Penn State, the fact that we're having conversations, deliberate and potential, and there's funding behind those conversations to think about learning spaces and what should learning spaces look like. I appreciated Eric's conversation this morning that it doesn't need to be high tech, it can be active learning low tech. And I know that sometimes shocks people when you're at a teaching and learning with technology conference to have folks say that. But I think we certainly have a challenge around those spaces, not just from a number of seats and chairs in those seats, but how do we start to transform those seats to the expectations of our learners? How do we transform those spaces to allow faculty to dream big about what can happen in those spaces? What's the development and the training opportunities that we provide? How do we frame that for our students? When Eric was talking about having his students own their own learning, that's a shift for many of our 18 to 22-year-olds. So how do we have those conversations in really honest and serious ways, so it's not just about I'm coming into this physics class and doing problem-based learning, but that I'm truly taking ownership of my entire educational process here at Penn State. I think the second challenge is, and I appreciate that everyone in this room is here today, is continuing to think about the technology as an enabler of good teaching and learning, and not the technology as the driver of that. So we have limited resources here at the institution. We have incredibly smart people doing really interesting things with those resources, but I think we need to be very deliberate about how we deploy those resources, where we're investing, and how we can show that there's truly a good impact on the learning for students.
Anybody else want to add? Craig?
I think a challenge is sometimes our business model. The provost says our business model should not drive our strategy. And I think we really need to look at making sure that the budget model supports our strategy. I think that's an issue. I think the other issue is fostering innovation, encouraging risk-taking. It's very difficult sometimes for a traditional institution to take those risks that we need to do. And what keeps me up awake, are we moving fast enough, thoughtfully? And specifically in the World Campus, it's competition. There are so many institutions. When World Campus started, there were about 6 institutions. Now there's 330 very good institutions offering online. Final thing is, I think as we get more into analytics, I'm concerned about student data and privacy issues and what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. I think we need to be very thoughtful about that information, because the data will help us with student success, but I think we need to be careful about that.
Let's turn it over to our first question. And if you could please share your name and your part.
Yes, good morning. Brian Redmond, Psychology Department. First, I just wanted to thank you all for coming in to have this talk. It shows a strong belief in all the people and ideas that are going on in this room. Second, Dr. Weidemann, you mentioned integration, and that was a great idea. We've been working in the College of Liberal Arts with a small kind of grassroots type of program, partnered with the faculty development at the World Campus, and I was wondering if you could expand on that idea of integration in particular. What do you envision that integration looking like?
I think, Rob, you may want to jump in on this one, too. I think it's happening a lot already. I mean, if you look at it, there's a number of positions that are funded from revenues from the World Campus within the colleges, and those positions support the World Campus, but they also support RI instruction. But I think more fundamentally, Rob and I chair the Digital Learning Steering Committee, which Jennifer always says it's the Learning Committee, not the Digital Learning Committee. But the fact of the matter is, years ago, it was the World Campus Online Steering Committee. So it's really looking collectively together about student learning and student success. This week, or just last week, the Faculty Senate, to their committees, are looking at this issue of how do we focus on access for students, whether a campus, UP, or whatever. And it's going to challenge a lot of thinking. But I think we're migrating slowly to it. I think you can point to a lot of examples where it's happening. But then also, as Dr. Barron and I think Rob talked about, is that is funding following his imperatives. There's a lot of money going towards economic development right now. I assume as we look towards more and more of how we do this integration, there'll be resources to help us achieve that. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know, do you want to?
Yeah, I just said that because of the unique nature of our university with a very large campus here at University Park, smaller campuses spread throughout the state, we want to be able to provide access to the same rich and broad and diverse kind of education regardless of where a student is. And so at the campuses that often means sharing the resources across various campuses and with University Park. So when we start to intermingle what happens in the resident, on a resident basis with what we can provide through online learning, through shared programs, then we enrich the education of students across the whole university.
Yeah, Rangan Nathan from Penn State Berks campus. My question is, I know you guys are all talking at a high level in terms of digital and future. Let's kind of look in that direction. If we listen to Dr. Mazur today, it was very clear we are still in the old assessment form. Do you guys see a brainometer that I could stick into my student's brain and I know they learned their capacity full, go home, come back tomorrow? What do you see as assessment in the new digital world from where you are critically? Maybe from where I am as a faculty, I still find it hard to know beyond the current test mode. Maybe senior design projects help, but so I just wanted your thoughts on those.
Sure. I think if you think about assessment as just a small part of our entire teaching and learning process, and how can we do authentic assessment? Correct. I mean, I think that's your question. I think looking at and helping our faculty through this process, whether it's through instructional design discussions, does it have to be technology based or not? I mean, I love today that we had this happened without any kind of technology in the room, right? But it really is starting with the learning outcomes. What is it that you want your students to be able to know and do from the beginning? How do we help you, whether it's TLT or instructional designers at the World Campus or instructional designers on your campus, help you have the discussion about what kinds of activities help us get students to that place, whether it's problem-based learning like Dr. Mazur talked about this morning. There may be case studies that will be doing that. And then if you look deeply at the research about what is good assessment and how do you know that students have learned, a lot of what he does is peer learning. So how do we assess whether every individual in that peer group has learned? And so there are different ways that you can do that, both through a self-assessment, through individual work that's contributed as part of a group dynamic that holds the students responsible for the kinds of things that they're doing to each other. So if we were a small group working on a project, I couldn't be the slacker because my peers will not only evaluate me, but our group score depends on how we do individually on each part of this project. So there's some peer pressure associated with that as well. I think that combined with thinking about what kinds of skills do your students need in a new and emerging world. It's problem solving, it's critical thinking, a lot of creative thinking, I think innovation, how do we get our students to think innovatively? That's very hard to measure on a multiple choice test. So how do we develop activities and then learn how to assess them? And we could help you get there.
Thank you. Kristen Bittner, instructional designer. I have had the opportunity to work at a Commonwealth campus, the World Campus, and I now work for Penn State Public Broadcasting. And in those roles, I mean, as an instructional designer in each of these units, I've seen various content management and development platforms. As a Commonwealth campus designer, I've had to support courses that use Drupal, courses that use Drupal with Elms, courses that use World Campus Evolution, courses that just use Angel and whatever else we can link into Angel within the 1 gigabit limit. I was just wondering at your level, at the higher senior level, if you've been talking about consistency in the student experience, going in and out of all of these different platforms, the instructional design support resources for each of these items, because we don't always have access to like the great resource of the World Campus helped us, for example, at a campus. And then also the consistent experience for faculty to have to maybe, if they're doing a dual program at a campus and at University Park, using all these different systems.
Yes.
And Kate D'Amico will pay you on your way out the door.
That's right.
If it's okay,
ahead, yes.
I'll start on that one. And you bring up a very much the heart of our challenge, and ensuring that the campuses have the same level of a student experience as at UP or World Campus or anyone else, so that it's all one Penn State. So common CMS, so that instructors and instructional designers, faculty members can share content. It's not only important for the teaching and learning realm, but for the support of those realms as well. And how do we effectively provide that ability to you? Innovation is vital to what we do, but unmanaged innovation can be a huge challenge as well. And we have to figure out a way, and especially in the instructional design space, and we've got a lot of really brilliant instructional designers at this university, and all of them very, very willing to help. And it's a matter of how do we bring all those brilliant minds together to bring those kinds of tools that everybody can share, and we don't make that a barrier to sharing the good information, the good learning objects, the good things that come along with providing that Penn State experience.
Sure. Part of our most recent endeavors has been our joining of Unizin. And while it's in its infancy, I do believe that the technology that's going to be implemented through Unizin, which is an LMS that in theory we will have a decision about shortly, a content repository and a way for that repository to talk very nicely and cleanly with not only our LMS, but the LMS of the other 9 institutions that are involved, and then an analytics piece. So the technology is still in the being molded phase of this. As that's being molded, and as we start to think about what is it that we do that's unique to Penn State, because we have 24 campuses, geographically diverse, one university geographically diverse. I'm getting there. What would that allow us to do differently, not only within Penn State, but with those other 9 institutions? So we know, for example, that the intro biology course, there are some unique pieces at each institution, but there may be a standard set of 75 learning outcomes that we would have within that intro biology course. Is there an opportunity for faculty to collaborate, instructional designers to collaborate, to create reusable learning objects that can be housed in this repository? So I think we're really at the cusp of that, and what those economies of scale will let us do. Help us think about that. So when you're asked to be a part of a conversation about Unizin, when you're asked to be a part of a conversation about instructional design here at Penn State, jump in and volunteer.
I think it's also really important from the student perspective as far as their interaction with different online classes. I looked at the SOSN study and the study that Gary and Wayne did, and I think there's some debate about the outcome, but I think it really showed that our students want and expect some consistency as they go from course to course, particularly older students. So I think it's important that we keep responding to the students' needs.
Yeah, as long as there's a provision for innovation and for experimentation with new things, because you can get locked into a particular.
I think it's just the basics we're trying to make sure.
We have mics in the back as well. Questions? Questions for our panel?
Okay, this is a broad question. As an institution, I wanted to ask any of you, what are some things you think we do well in the areas of learning and innovation and technology, and what are some areas where you think we could improve?
We do today very well. And I don't just mean today, but I think the sharing and the collaboration, the understanding that teaching and learning with technology, and maybe the with technology is in a small letters. The fact that we're talking about a digital learning steering committee, but we're really having honest conversations about learning as a whole at the institution, I think are fabulous. I think the wealth of instructional designers that Craig mentioned there are a lot of institutions that would chomp at the bit to have a small fraction of that, and we have that as a really rich resource.
I think the variability is a challenge, and one place that we can do better. Right now, I think we have some basic issues in delivering content instruction between locations because everyone is doing technology differently. And again, as Rob said, innovation is absolutely vital. But when we start becoming too variable in the technology and how we deliver it, then that causes problems in those students being able to get to that and use that information.
Yeah, I think one of the things I hear most from students is their concern about not getting timely feedback on their learning. And so it is vitally important that we capture whatever information we can, coming back to the earlier question, about how students are doing and what they're learning, so that we can provide that feedback. Because sometimes they don't know what our expectations are for their learning. And unless we're providing that feedback regularly, they're not going to be able to get it.
Absolutely.
Jim Collins talks about the magic of the and I just talked earlier about some consistency relative to the content management system. On the other hand, innovation, I think, Karen, one thing I'm concerned about is, again, are we moving rapidly enough? Jennifer showed the picture of the baby, and how's that baby born this year, what are they going to expect in the classroom? How are we going to provide what they need? What are their, how far is personalized learning going to go? How far analytics? I mean, I think my concern sometimes, are we moving fast enough to keep up to the demands of what our students are going to expect in the future?
Hi, my name is Danielle Krasinski, and I'm with the College of Ag and Extension. And I actually have two questions that are related to one another, but I'll just give you the first one to begin with, if that's okay. And it ties in with what you were just talking about. I'd like to know your thoughts on how do we best spread the news of all of these various technologies that so many people are working on that are so amazing, so that all the people know about them and are not overwhelmed by them or confused. You've got students, you've got faculty, you've got staff, you've got administration, you have all of the different campuses. I just would like to know your thoughts on that to begin with. Thank you.
I think if any of us have the answer to that, we would be millionaires. We wouldn't be sitting at the table here. I think communication is perpetually a challenge in any organization, and an organization of this size and of the diverse nature of where we are, I think makes that a challenge. So I don't know. And somebody could tweet that out. Just don't tell my husband.
If you have ideas, throw them at us, right?
Yeah, I think in my 35 years at Penn State, one thing I've always been surprised at is how dense our filters are in getting information out to everyone. And I think maybe we have to look at the same technologies that we're trying to inspire in our teaching and learning to disperse information effectively. So.
Was there a second part to that question?
Yes, there was. Thank you. And this ties in with that. How is there consideration being given for how students and faculty and staff will decide which of the technologies enable their most appropriate method of learning? I mean, there's so many different ways. Will they be introduced to each new freshman class? Will there be postcards sent out? Will there be yet another email that many people don't read? It just seems to me like there's such a wealth of awesome stuff coming out. How will everybody get to know about it, and then how will they decide what's best for them?
Sure. We actually have a student group called the Student Technology Advisory Committee. It has representation from undergraduate education, graduate education, the Commonwealth campuses. So we try to get a broad diversity of folks participating in that group. We hear a couple of things from those students. Number one, they learn about technologies because their faculty have required them as part of use of class. So I think the way to get the technology into the hands of the students is to work with the faculty. How do we talk to faculty about this? How do we engage them in conversations about how this may or may not be the best tool for them to utilize in their classroom, and what's the most appropriate match there? So I think that's sort of one easy way for us to start to spread that, but it doesn't happen overnight. I think then we get some student champions and folks that are interested in those technologies. We had a group of students that we sent out to a hackathon that's working with a small company that we're working with on some learning analytics piece. They came back excited and passionate, and they took first and second place at this competition, which was pretty great. Penn State represented well. But they were excited and passionate about it, and they were encouraging more of their peers to be a part of this hacking community, and hacking not in a negative way, but creation rather than breaking into things. I think you'll see at the hackathon next weekend the sheer number of students coming in and understanding that this is such a powerful tool, but I need it to do things the way that I am doing. So by listening to our students address those things from their perspective, I think is incredibly valuable. So go next weekend if you can, or follow along. I'm sure there'll be a Twitter feed.
The other thing we're seeing is a lot more significant participation in faculty and faculty development, both offered by the World Campus and by the colleges and departments. And also now that's extending to graduate students. So not only those that are TAs, but also those that want to be marketable when they leave Penn State. So I think that's going to be another way to connect and help people understand innovation.
Hi, my name is Matt. I am an undergraduate here at University Park. And so, we're talking about things like assessment and assessing the learning that teachers that we're hoping students learn. But some of the things I think about are, we all built this assessment for teacher-specific content, but what do we as students, what do we really want to learn and do with our lives, in a sense? And so I found that while I'm here, the things that I have benefited from and learned the most from are extracurricular activities and not really my classes. So I wonder sometimes, why are those extracurricular? Why aren't those curricular things I'm doing? And so I'm wondering if, whether it's through technology, high tech, low tech, or like Mazur was talking about, just shifting up aspects of teaching, what are your thoughts on ways to address things like that?
Well, two things. One is I think, as Rob talked about the classrooms, I think we should have knowledge commons all over the university, in the residence halls, down at Starbucks, wherever students want to get together to learn, because I think the learning is ubiquitous, both in the classroom and out. And then also one of Dr. Barron's imperatives is student engagement. He's looking at how can we create and scale more opportunities for students for undergraduate research, internships, service learning, applied community research, volunteerism. He's really trying to focus on that, and we're trying to look at ways that we can create more opportunities for students to do that. Because you pointed out, it's you really learn, as Dr. Muser said this morning, it's where the learning really occurs, and also it helps as far as your employability.
I think they can be particularly effective too if that outside the classroom engagement is connected very strongly to the curricular component. So engaged scholarship is a term that implies that you have that interconnection between what's happening in the classroom and the building of knowledge there with the practical experience that's happening through extracurricular or other kinds of activities outside the classroom.
Thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah,
We
Yes.
appreciate you
Great.
being here.
I was going to ask you, why are you here?
I guess, well, my first response is because I guess I'm interested in this kind of stuff.
Great.
But so, I guess I have to give a little brief. I don't know. So I'm studying psychology undergrad. I'm also in an IUG program for learning design technology, and my supervisor is actually Kyle Peck. So,
Dragging you.
He gets extra credit though, right, Kyle?
Yeah.
Jason Ingerman in the LDT program here first told me about this. So, I thought this was all really interesting, and I'm glad I came.
Great.
Okay. Hi, I'm Suzanne Schaefer, and I'm an instructional designer at the York campus. And I know we're talking about digital learning, but I think at the campuses also very important for us are our physical spaces. And yesterday we were at a really great day, the whole day committed to learning spaces. And I came away with lots of questions about that. In terms of, when you look at this room, it's very pragmatic, it's very utilitarian, but the role of aesthetics and beauty to space. And, when we think about ourselves as learners, we come in with tasks to do. So I'm really building up to a shameless plug to say, things like the Krause Innovation Studio that are both, were designed with function, but also, a beautiful space with light. And when we talked to students in the panel, we said, what kinds of spaces would you guys like to have? They often said we need space to spread out, right? We need windows to look out of. We need beautiful spaces, right, to inspire us. So our spaces are there, we get our work done, but are they spaces that really inspire us to be creative and innovative? So it would be really nice to see funding coming down to the campuses where we could create some of those innovative spaces for that kind of work to happen. Would really be fabulous.
It would be. Thank you. Did you hear that, Rob?
I remember last year at this program, a faculty member, I think from Berks, talked about her flipped classroom. And so she would bring her students in, and they would take the rows and put them in groups. And then when they were done, they had to put them back in rows. And I thought that was very symbolic of our challenges here.
Yeah.
We have about 4 minutes left. A question in the back.
Hi, Clarabelle Lynn, World Campus Marketing. I was really excited to hear Dr. Mazur this morning in his perspective of teaching and learning. One of the things in marketing that we usually look into is our specific audiences. How does that differ in the teaching and learning experience? What do you think the greatest challenges are in terms of coming up with a consistent student experience that applies to all these different types of audiences, younger and older? And also, what do you think about the tie-ins with K through 12 trends as far as new incoming students that will become the new 18 to 22-year-olds?
Well, yeah, I guess I define things a little bit differently. I think we want a consistent quality of learning experience, but I think the experience can vary depending on the discipline, the characteristics of the learners in front of you. There can be differences, and there should be differences. I think I think there's a lot to be said for personalized education or customized, whatever adjective you want to use, but something that is taking into account the differences amongst learners, either individually or as a group. But I think what we all need to focus on is the consistency of the learning quality. And that's kind of a tougher thing to measure, but it certainly should be the goal.
I think we have time for one more question. Anybody who hasn't asked anything yet?
Since we don't really have much time.
Now we have less.
That's technology there.
That's on Saturday Night Live. So since we don't really have that much time, I thought maybe just ask for like adjectives. As you look into the future of where we're all headed, what are some of the words you would use to describe adjectives that you think apply to where we're headed?
Engaged.
Exciting.
Changing, yeah, challenging.
Innovation.
Thank you.
All right, folks.
Kyle, probably disruptive too, which is
Disruptive.
concerning.
Yeah, and risky.
Folks, as this session is coming to an end, a couple quick things for you. Number one, if you had questions that you did not have an opportunity to ask, we will put a Twitter feed up on the whiteboard. Please feel free to send it out. All of our panelists will be here for the remainder of the day and have offered to have conversations. So if any of you have specific questions that you weren't comfortable asking. We would like to thank you all very much for attending. And as a closing thought, this is an opportunity for you all to hear from them, but it's also an opportunity for them to make sure that if there are really burning messages that they'd like for you to walk out of here remembering, that they have one last opportunity. So we'll go Twitter style in the interest of the style created by Kyle. If you have one thing you'd like folks to walk out of here with, real quick thought. Jennifer?
Be open to change.
Rob?
Wow, that was short. That was really short. So I think there's incredibly exciting possibilities in front of us, and we just make sure we take advantage of them.
Rick?
I think from the IT perspective, again, it's walking that razor's edge, being able to sustain and support innovation in a manner that lets us move forward in a fashion that can be supported.
Correct.
Two things. One, thoughtful innovation, and if you have really hard questions, ask Kevin Rooney over there against the wall.
Folks, thank you very much for attending the session, and please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you.